Everyone knows that it's a pilot's job to safely fly passengers from one destination to the next, but on one UK flight in 1990, it was the pilot himself who was anything but safe. On June 10, 1990, a British Airways flight took off around 7 a.m. from the UK to Malaga, Spain. On board were 81 passengers and 6 crew members, including the plane's captain, Tim Lancaster. According to an official report by the UK Department of Transport, once the plane had stabilized in the air to about 17,300 feet pressure altitude, the captain and co-pilot released their shoulder harnesses and loosened their seatbelts to get comfortable. Then, something like out of a movie or the television show Lost occurred about a half hour after the flight's departure, just as it was passing over Didcot in Oxfordshire. The Aviation Safety Network reports that right when the crew began to serve drinks in the cabin, an explosion occurred and the fuselage filled with mist. As a result, the flight was depressurized and the cockpit's left window screen was suddenly blown out. Lancaster was sucked out of the opening into air temperatures of just over 1 degree Fahrenheit and extreme winds, according to the UK Department of Transport. In a stroke of luck, one of the stewards was working on the cabin side door where the captain was and rushed to his aid, holding onto his waist to prevent him from fully being sucked out of the aircraft. The other flight attendants made an announcement on the overhead to alert the passengers and went into their emergency positions. Meanwhile, the co-pilot called Mayday into the Air Traffic Radar Control Service and began his descent to safety, putting the plane into autopilot so he could assist the stewards. However, the Mayday was the only information that went through, and the chief sector controller took no further action, waiting for more information about the emergency. The co-pilot eventually made contact with the safety team on the ground, telling them the captain was half sucked out of the airplane and was believed to be dead. Meanwhile, other flight attendants hooked arms to prevent them from falling out themselves and assisted the first flight attendant in holding on to the captain, but they began quickly losing strength to hold on, according to the Aviation Safety Network. Nigel Ogden was one of those flight attendants. He wrote about the experience for the Sydney Morning Herald and said he first thought he'd heard a bomb when the pressure caused the explosion.
We thought, either Tim's going to die or we're going to die, That was going through my mind.
Luckily, the rotating group of flight attendants were able to maintain their grip until the plane could safely land at Southampton Airport at 7:55 a.m. Once on the ground, Lancaster was rushed to Southampton General Hospital, where he was treated for bone fractures in his arms and frostbite from his exposure to the high altitude. According to the Aviation Safety Network, the left windscreen was replaced just 27 hours before the flight. However, the person who installed it used bolts that were too small for the size of this airplane's windscreens, causing it to easily slip out with depressurization. According to the UK Department of Transport, this process was due to a conglomeration of, quote, poor work practices, poor judgments, and perceptual errors, each one of which eroded the factors of safety built into the method of operation promulgated by British Airways. Specifically, they attributed the errors to sleep deprivation and circadian effects associated with the end of a first night shift. Of course, the responsibility fell on more people than just the one maintenance person who secured the bolts. This was supposed to be checked by a shift maintenance manager, but the incorrect installation all went unnoticed or unheeded, according to the UK Department of Transport. After Lancaster was released from the hospital, he returned to flying just 5 months later. He even stayed with the same airline until moving to fly with EasyJet in 2003 and ultimately retiring in 2008. After careful inspection of the incident, the airline issued 8 new safety recommendations to change their practices and prevent an accident like this from happening again. As for the flight attendants, they were recognized for their heroic acts by Queen Elizabeth II in 1991 for valuable services in the air, despite being in danger themselves.